Nothing's ever gonna stop Kirblog. Nothing's ever gonna slow me down. Oh no, a meteor has stopped me. I mean, it stopped you from making videos. I'm recording this on Sunday night, a couple days before this video goes up. I had no energy at all. I was completely drained and burnt myself out and felt like shit. And now at 3 o'clock in the morning, I am super energized and felt like recording Kirblog. Once again, I'm kind of continuing the sort of train of, advice-related Kirblogs to, sort of my life and work experiences. So I decided to tackle a question submitted over YouTube from Something the Blank. Hello, I hope I'm not being a bother, but I couldn't help but be impressed with your animated series Tome. For a while, I've been thinking of creating my own animated series and finally had the time and people, well, sorta, to do it. If you wouldn't mind, do you have a bit of advice for a new animator? Thank you for your time, and any help is greatly appreciated. Well, thank you for the question, Something the Blank. I can only, as is often the case with these types of advice column type Kirblogs, I can only offer what it is that I know specifically. I have followed a very all over the place kind of path, and I'm sure if you felt the need to submit to this, you've probably seen a lot of my stuff before, which I appreciate. In which case, hopefully my experiences will make sense as to where they're coming from, and I don't know if they'll actually be able to help a whole lot in the long run, but I'll tell you kind of what I did, and to anybody else listening, because I've gotten a few other messages like this before. I'm certainly, as is also often the case, I have to remind everyone that I am no authority on creating or being a professional or anything like that whatsoever. I've just done what I've done. People like what I've done to some extent. It's had a certain level of success, which I'm wholly appreciative of. But again, it's entirely just my experience, and I can only hope that it will help in some way, shape, or form. So that said, I will say, if you want to create an animated series on the internet, I will say up front that at the current time of 2016, it is an uphill battle, and there is not a ton of money making involved. I feel it is extremely important to know that going into it, because the fact of the matter is, and I've talked ad nauseum on so many different interviews and Kirblogs and commentaries about how it has become continually unlucrative for animators particularly on YouTube to make a living anymore. But that said, I went into doing Tome knowing that I was not going to be making a shit ton of money. Even back when we had the sponsorships from Newgrounds and etc. And not that it wasn't appreciated, but just the fact of the matter was it wasn't a whole lot of money to split between everybody involved. It's what we were able to make. And, same thing with currently, I make, whatever little money that I make from ad revenue. Even when I was doing Tome at the time, it was not a lot of money. So if you want to do something like this, you really have to plan carefully. And I would say that the livelihood versus passion Kirblog that I did with Trailer Drake last week, kind of plays very much into that. I won't repeat that information. You can go back and listen to that kind of and how it factors into this. But yeah, just knowing like ahead of time that there's probably not going to be, you're not going to get rich off this stuff. Even if like it becomes like super popular, gets millions of views, and like you're able to do merchandise and brand deals or whatever, it's still not going to be like, you're not going to get rich doing this. Not that I think many people would have like illusions of grandeur about doing animation, in general, unless they want to become like the next Seth MacFarlane or something. In which case, if you want to do that, then good luck to you. Because it's impossible, but yeah, that's just, I feel like that's something like kind of basic and upfront to say about this. You mentioned in your question, and this is relevant, of course, to a lot of the projects that I've worked on, that you have folks that you're going to be working with. I would say determining exactly what your team is going to be is also extremely important. A lot of folks tend to work solo, which is totally fine, and at most maybe they might work with like a friend to help them out, or obviously voice actors, but there's a lot of cases where just there are solo animators and they just make a bunch of stuff themselves, which is totally fine. What's kind of cool is that what's happening more now, or what's happened in recent years, is that more people are thinking to work in teams and everybody kind of works towards a common goal. This can be fantastic. It can also, if you don't know what you're doing and if you don't establish roles clearly between everybody, it can also be a potential recipe for disaster, just, to be blunt about it. Now, for me, what was kind of fortunate is that more so than anything, the Nintendo collabs that I did on Newgrounds back in the day were the ultimate training ground for working in a crew of people. They were, less intimate relationships, compared to the intimate. That sounds bizarre, but they were less personal and like friendships made out of absolutely every single member of the Nintendo collabs crews between the three of them, because they all changed compared to the crew that I worked with on Tome. But in comparison, the Nintendo collabs allowed me to work with, a shit ton of different animators, a shit ton of different voice actors, and different people that were working in different capacities all over the place and everything. And, determining, okay, who knows how to work in a team and who doesn't, to just kind of be black and white about it. Which was great, because then by the time that I got to Tome, a lot of people from that, time had carried over, onto this crew. And, since we were able to work well together and we could establish everything, nice and clearly, it was great. And, and I was able to, as a bonus, form wonderful bonds with those people, because they're amazingly talented and wonderful human beings that I'm very happy to know and very grateful for the help on. But on that same note, again, it can be a recipe for disaster. You need to, as I said, establish roles clearly. Especially because if, again, not a lot of money is going to be involved, which is probably what the case is, everybody needs to make sure that they are all in for doing this, for whatever they happen to get in return. Because, like even with the crowdfunding campaign, like all of my crew members knew that were working for me directly, knew that it was not going to be a shit ton of money, and quite frankly, not the right amount of money that they deserved to be paid for the work that they were doing, because it's not a big budget project. That's just that was the reality. And I still felt bad about the fact that like I wasn't capable of paying them the money that they deserved for doing this kind of work, Tome or otherwise. But I was very lucky that they were all passionate and fully invested in wanting to complete the project for the same, all for the same collective reasoning. That's supposed to be what the motivation is for when you're doing something like this, that is essentially a passion project, or rather a project that just isn't going to be like this is your livelihood necessarily. But the problem is this can also turn into a battle of egos and disagreement. It's a very, very tough balance to find, where you need to, because especially there has to be a leader. There has to be a director, a producer. There has to be a person who has the vision, and they're making sure that everything is, coming to pass. But the other balance you have to strike is making sure that everybody gets a certain level of creative freedom to do their jobs. You have to be able to trust each of your individual team members, whether it be, background artists, a sound designer, musicians, voice actors, fellow animators in some cases, depending. I don't know what your setup is like, and it changes from team to team. But, like for instance, if you're a writer and you're working with an animator and they're going to be doing all of the visuals, you can have, a distinct kind of idea of what you want it to visually look like in your head if you're the writer, if the writer is the creator. But if the animator is going to be the one doing all of the actual visual work on it, you got to let them have some creative freedom on what they would like the visuals to look like, especially because that goes into the next point. Having a plan for exactly how you're going to go about doing the show itself, which I'll get to that, kind of jumping a little bit ahead here. But you need to know exactly like what it is that you're making in terms of like the actual content. Like I went into doing Tome Season 1 knowing I was going to make at least 8 episodes, and even though there was almost a cutoff point, and it almost stopped at 4, and then turned into 9, and then eventually 10, I wrote like 8 full episode scripts before I got into doing any animation at all, right? And kind of in tandem with that, knowing the general length of the videos were going to be, somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes, and in some cases even longer than that, unexpectedly. And I just kind of had to make do with what I was able to do. And also knowing the level of quality the show was going to be. This is what I'm tying in about the animation side of things and the visuals. I knew Tome was going to be set up in a way that was easier to produce, with having stuff like the talking avatars and the reusable sprites and the different assets that I could use, in every single episode in order to, get an episode done in a certain amount of time, because determining how long it'll take you to make a single video is extremely important. A pitfall I fell into, and it wasn't like a major detriment or anything, but just, I at one point, if I hadn't said somewhere in a commentary or something, again, sorry for repeating, but I had at one point thought I could get an episode of Tome done every single month, which was absolutely fucking ludicrous, and the show would not have been as good as it was. Up to your determination on if that's the case or not. If I had done it that way, I would have been rushing my ass off. And again, a lot of that also had to do with thanks to the feedback that I got from people like Chris O'Neill and Zach Haddle at the time, which I talked about in my Taking Criticism Kirblog from last week, if you haven't heard that. But anyway, like knowing exactly like how difficult, or at least a rough idea of how difficult it was going to be to make an episode of Tome at the time. Even though I assumed it would only be, a month per episode, it ended up really being once every like season of a year or so. So like once every 3 months generally, give or take an extra month or week or whatever, depending on how detailed the episode was, on how much longer or shorter it was compared to other ones, etc. If there's going to be any extra special things like having, a certain piece of music done or a new background or recording like a special guest voice actor, in time, or needing, whatever was necessary for it. But give or take, I was able to determine how much time it was going to take, how difficult it would be to make a single episode. Now, I don't know if you who asked this question are going to be making something like as long form as a show like Tome, if you want to go for something a little bit shorter in length, like other stuff that's out there, which, is probably also for the better. Because then it is easier to know how difficult it's going to be, how detailed you want to get, and how often you can get an episode or an installment, whatever it would be, out in an X amount of time. The shorter, then the easier it is to determine all those things. But that's entirely up to your discretion. Kind of tying in with that too, next segue, consistency in your branding. Both in promoting it, like on social media, if you're gonna do like a Twitter specifically for the show, or just through your own following, or a Facebook page or whatever, Tumblr, the works, whatever you want to do, making advertisement videos on YouTube specifically promoting the show, but more so specifically your updates with new installments. You have to have a level of consistency, because one of the other big pitfalls, the two big pitfalls are the earlier one I mentioned about teams falling apart and not fucking agreeing with each other and then turning into a disaster. And the other thing being, putting out an episode 1 of this brand new series on YouTube, and then episode 2 either comes out like years later or never. It happens all the fucking time, and it sucks. And it's really sad, because in a lot of those cases, it's like, oh, this had a lot of potential and this could have been something, and they just didn't have their shit together, whether it was a solo creator or a team of people making something together or whatever, and it just didn't wind up happening, and it sucks. Don't fall into that. You need to make sure that all of the things that I mentioned earlier are in place to the best of your ability, because there's going to be unexpected shit that comes up. There was for me. There always has been for me. All the Nintendo collabs took way longer to get done than I expected. The Parody Rangers movie took 3 years to finish the entire thing from front to back, because I was busy with school at the time. And Tome, I didn't realize I was going to be working on Tome for 4 years, and they were 4 amazing years, and I'm still proud of what I got, but I didn't expect that to happen at all. So the more that you can research and figure out and hone in exactly on all of those details, the less pitfalls and the less unexpected issues are going to come up, or expected issues that you'll know how to deal with in that way. And then that just kind of comes down to the last and probably the most important reason, or the most important thing, is your reasoning for doing exactly what it is that you want to do. This could be a whole topic into itself, and it probably will be. I'm thinking of maybe doing that this weekend if possible, unless something else comes up. But you need to determine exactly what it is that you're doing, why it is that you're doing it, and why. Again, if you're working in a team of people, why everybody collectively is going to be working together to do it. Again, if it's to make money, and in that case, not a lot of money, then that's fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But as long as you're aware of that ahead of time, then, more power to you. If it's to get popular, then you definitely need to stop, sit back, and reevaluate why you should or should not do this. Because if you're motivated by something like that, and I'm sure I've talked about that on other subjects before too, other Kirblogs, it's not a good motivation. It just flat out is not something that is good to drive you, because it's going to make your project and your team and your drive, whether it's, you by yourself or all of them or whatever, fall the fuck apart very quickly. Now, moreover, if it's something that just, if it's a dream, if it's just a flat out passion of, I want to make a story, I want to tell a story that I genuinely care about and am fully emotionally invested into because it means something to me, please, throw yourself in, go 100% full fucking force and blow it out of the park. And if it becomes popular and successful and makes a fair amount of money in the process, more power to you, even better. For me, I made Tome in this particular case. There were definitely there are a lot of different things that went into why I ended up making it. But the biggest reason above all else, and the most important reason, is because my number one passion is telling a big story that is personally meaningful to me. And now, as I've learned over the course of doing the show, what's become the evolution of that sort of drive is leaving a positive impact on the people who are experiencing the stories that I tell. Which again, that's a whole nother subject, and I might be tackling that this weekend. No promises, but most likely that'll be the next subject. But that just comes down to in my particular case, I want to tell a story that has an emotional impact on the people that are giving enough of a shit to want to watch it in the first place. Because again, in the case of Tome is not a runaway success. It is not a massive, huge, super popular animated show online, especially not in comparison to other stuff that has been produced by my colleagues who came from the Newgrounds origin point. But you know what? I was once motivated upon a time, during my video game parody phase in the late 2000s or whatever, by wanting to get popular and eventually to make money and et cetera. But as I kind of had my eye-opening experiences, I really hammered down exactly what it is that I'm doing this for in the first place. And that's what you and anybody who is willing to help you to any kind of further extent, needs to be aware of. You need to fully get, okay, why and what purpose, and is this going to be worth the blood, sweat, tears, the time, the effort, just everything about your life, about yourself that you're putting into this? Is it going to be worth it? Is the payoff worth it? Is it meaningful and soul feeding enough to you to do it? If it is, go for it. Just fucking go for it and don't look back. Even in your moments of weakness, which will also happen if you're, spending as much time on it as I did. But if it's for anything else, but something as clear cut as that, then don't. Or if not, don't reevaluate why, and really get to the core of what it is, because everybody walks a different path, and it's totally fine to not have an answer right away. You can figure it out, but figure it out. You have to figure all of these things out. And if you do, if you as many of these things as you can figure out ahead of time, the smoother the journey is going to be. That doesn't mean it's going to be smooth in the grand scheme of things. It's still going to be a fucking uphill battle, like I said at the very beginning. But it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be a lot more okay, this is it's going to feel worth it. It's going to feel like this is something that I am okay with and happy to do for however long it's going to take to do it. So I hope that helps at all. I hope hopefully it wasn't too all over the place. I had a little bit of an outline that I wrote ahead of time. I don't often do that with these, but I didn't want it to be too stream of consciousness or whatever. But yeah, that's everything I have to say about it for now. But in the meantime, in the comments below, if any of you guys have any other kind of further questions about this or things that you'd like to add, if anybody listening out here is a creator or any of my colleagues or anybody like that wants to throw in their 2 cents or anything like that regarding this, please do. And if you have future Kirblog topic suggestions, leave a comment about that too. Or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, social media, or apparently YouTube, because I just realized that this was from a YouTube message, and that rarely ever happens. So I guess I just check everything, don't I? Anyway, thanks for listening. Look forward to this weekend's Kirblog, whether I'm able to do the promised topic that I mentioned before or not. Probably will. We'll see what happens, unless the world ends tomorrow. Who knows? Unless that meteor comes down and kills me, like I mentioned in the opening theme song. Bye.